Good morning, Orod.
Good morning, Soma. How are you?
Good. How are you doing? How is Melbourne today?
I'm very good. Today it's sunny but cold. That's why I have this turtleneck.
Turtle. I love that.
Yeah, so I
Well, you
can feel
house.
that
Yeah.
winter is here.
Well, yeah, Melbourne, wait. Winter is always there, isn't it? Okay, I can see someone else here. So do you want to talk a little bit about our guest, Orod?
Yes. So, in fact, last year around May, we start the Kanban Lab, and we
Mm.
had a few special episodes with a few special guests. And today is the second episode of the season two, and we have Dan Ploeg. So, welcome, Dan, and thanks for your time. You are one of the most experienced Kanban practitioner and trainer in Australia. So,
Yeah.
do you want to introduce yourself? I'm sure a lot of people know you, but in case if someone doesn't know you.
Yeah, sure. As you said, my name's Daniel Ploeg, and I've been doing Kanban for a little while. And probably over a decade now, I've been using Kanban and helping teams and organizations with it. And what I've really come to like, I love Kanban and the way it's got a very human-centric approach to solving problems in organizations, and also being very effective at it. So those are some of the things that really sort of drew me to it. It's very, I guess, a natural extension of myself, applying Kanban in different contexts. So yeah, I love doing that. Love running the training and things like that, and seeing that little light bulb moment
Mhm.
occur with people in the training sessions. It's really a lot of fun to see people actually sort of grok onto how Kanban works and how it can help them. It's I really get a kick out of that.
Dan, before I become the Kanban trainer and start experimenting, I read some of your articles. So it's good. I learned a lot from your website and your articles, especially one of my favorite that actually, uh, light one of those balls. Was the lead time distribution chart. So thanks
Yeah.
for sharing your experience with the community. So what do you want to talk about today?
Yeah, so something that has come up a lot with a number of organizations is about scaling Kanban and how do we go about scaling Kanban. And, there's a little bit to it, but, hopefully as we go through this discussion, you'll probably see that it's not as complex as what you might think,
Hmm.
in terms of how you go about doing it.
Yep,
Yeah.
that's a wonderful topic, Dan. And actually, we are on the topic that you're saying. And Australia, like everywhere, there's like big agile transformation going on. So if I'm someone who's listening to this podcast, the first question I would be like thinking, is it even possible to scale Kanban? Because Kanban is not a framework as such, right? That's something that we keep talking about in this podcast. So
Yep.
how does that even like happen? What are your experiences?
Yeah, what does that mean?
Hmm.
Scaling Kanban.
Yeah. Yeah, scaling Kanban is essentially just more Kanban. Okay. At its very simplest, that's absolutely what it is. You can end the podcast now. But no, but seriously, that's what it is. It's about, extending Kanban across from where your current view is. So your current view might be very, very narrow. It might be sort of low down in the organization. So it's about spreading Kanban across different problem areas and trying to start to move some of those bigger rocks, the bigger problems that you get as you sort of move through an organization. So that's how I view scaling Kanban.
Hmm.
So does that mean we need to start with one Kanban and then we add more Kanban and then link them together? Yeah.
Yeah, quite often that's how it occurs. You'll start with one area and you realize very quickly that that area is doing what it can within its own, I guess, um, scope, but that area actually interacts with lots of other areas within the organization.
Hmm.
And it's through those interactions that is where we start to scale out, is what are those other touch points in the organization. But it also depends on where you land in the organization, because if you land at a team level, that's where you start. But if you're landing at a program portfolio level, then that is, sort of where you start as well.
Okay,
So,
so that
start from
was,
where you are definitely applies.
yeah, that was actually my next question. Where you normally start when you want to introduce Kanban? So where do you start? And you said depends where you land.
Yeah, it depends where you are in the organization and your role and your influence and your I guess responsibilities that you have in the organization. So, as you know, we don't reorganize by default in Kanban. We respect roles and responsibilities and job titles, at least initially. So that's also a very important part about this is, okay, where do you land? What are your current roles and responsibilities? Trying to understand that context and the landscape. But I think the key thing is understanding what are the problems you're trying to solve. We don't scale Kanban for the fun of it. We're actually trying to solve problems.
Mm-hmm.
That's very interesting, Dan. And if I'm someone, like who is actually working in an organization where they are going through a massive agile transformation, my question would be, how is this different? Like what you're talking about, yes, it makes sense. But if I'm an exec, like let's say a management exec, and I want results, so how this can help me to have those kind of data and like also the confidence that it's going to work. So what are your experiences around that?
Yeah. So a couple of elements. So first of all, around the problem, talking to that key stakeholder executive or whoever it is in the organization is, what are the problems there? What are the pain points? Actually understanding that and understanding why those pain points actually exist. So rather than defaulting to everyone's got to reorganize so it looks like this, the default is, in Kanban alternatively is we want to actually solve real world problems right off the bat, so if that executive or leader is saying, look, we have problems with employee engagement, all right, or we have problems servicing our customers, maybe you've got both of those problems. Those are the kinds of things that we want to sort of start to tackle and look at how they can service their customers, plus enhance their employees' experience at the same time. So, those are, key elements of Kanban, and understanding what those pain points are. And ideally, if, that executive or manager or leader who's brought you into the organization has some concept of what are the outcomes or metrics that they're looking for, that can be really useful.
So, in one of our episodes, we were talking to Mike Burrows, and he mentioned that we live in a solution-driven society, which everyone come with a solution. And it's quite common then that executive or senior managers, they already have a solution. So when you go and talk to them, they say, okay, this is what we want. We already made our mind. Then how you start the conversation with them about the problem, because you basically, what you said is you change the point of view. So rather than look at the solution, you look at the problem, or you want them to look at the problem. So how you start the conversation in these kind of scenario?
Yeah. First of all, Mike Burrows is one of the nicest guys in the world, and I think he's got a really pragmatic approach to the way he solves this problem. And so I'm going to take a lend from some of his teachings to answer that question. And, I remember in the class that I had with him last year, one of the things that we started to pose is, why is that important? Just a nice probing question. So if someone says, I need to do this, and you just say, well, why is that important? And because then you get into the, why are we doing this? What's actually behind it? And I think if you continue to probe along those lines, you'll get to what is the outcome that they're actually looking for. Yeah. And I think that's really the key thing that we need to understand, not the task, but the outcome that they're looking for. And it's really, when you scale Kanban, it's first principles. So for those of you who have done the KSD course out there, you'll know the first step of static that we do in the course is to understand the points of dissatisfaction. You know, what are those problems? So I'm not doing anything that's not already part of the, you know, that Kanban practice or process. So I'm trying to understand what are the points of dissatisfaction or problems in the organization, and what would we like to achieve?
Solve, yeah. I love one of the facts, which is kind of a differentiating factor for me, is that how Kanban applies that human-centric approach, because we are basically doing an empathy mapping when we are going to any organization, right? Like we are trying to understand where the pain points are, what is actually bothering someone or the organization or the team. And then from there, we try to go to the next step. So, in your experience, what are the different things that you have actually experienced in different organizations where, you know, Kanban was not part of the picture? So, something that actually you have noticed that is like massively very different to what Kanban could do. Do you have any of those stories, like real stories?
What do you mean? Can you just elaborate on that, Soma?
Yes, cool. What I was trying to say is that like how Kanban applies that human-centric approaches. So if you have any other story where Kanban was not part of the solution, something else was a priority. It could be anything. So how was that different, and what can people do? Or like, you know, something that I have learned from you is that stealthy Kanban. So I was just trying to get some nuggets out of this for people who are actually in those situations where they can still apply some goodness of Kanban in whatever situation they are. So do you
Yeah.
have any of those
Well,
nuggets?
there's plenty of examples of stealth Kanban out there, and definitely you can do that at scale as well. But again, you start by talking to people about the problems, and you know it's those kinds of things. And what you tend to find is things like, oh, you know, there's a lack of transparency in what's going on about the work. Ah, okay, you know, so I have a great example of how we dealt with that lack of transparency in one organization I was in almost 10 years ago, where you know there was two streams of work. They were kicking off like an agile stream of work, and there was also a, you know, this traditional waterfall portfolio of projects and things like that. And you know, every month they would go back to the executives and say these are the projects that are going on, and da 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 da. And we saw the report that was given by the traditional waterfall projects, and it was in PowerPoint, and you know they tried to jam as much as they could on the page in like 6-point font, and there was just way too much detail. And so I cracked it. I said, there's no way I am putting together this silly PowerPoint slide. And so the agile practice manager said, okay, so what should we do? I said, let's create a program or portfolio board. Yeah. And he says, oh, that's awesome. Yeah, let's do that. So he said, so we prepped all of that for him. And he basically had this whiteboard that was on wheels that he wheeled into the executive room. He said, you know, these, you know, all the other portfolio had this fancy PowerPoint with this, that, and the other, and all of this presentation. And he said, I had this squeaky whiteboard. I walked in there like, you know, with the board for the executives, and it was all there for them to see. Where were the projects at? Where were they stuck? What we needed help with? All of that kind of stuff. And they found it very engaging, you know, right away. You know, so we didn't say Kanban or use Kanban. It was just like they weren't getting the transparency, you know, and they thought that that was the most transparent report that they'd ever had, you know, because we'd used the visualizations and sort of just opened it up and let them question us, and you know, try to provide us, you know, the detail that they really needed, and where we needed help as well. Yeah, from them.
So transparency, it's definitely one of the problem most company has, and most of them, in fact, don't really want to solve this problem, because when you make the problem transparent, then you know it's become visible and people need to solve it, and people don't want to solve it. So I have a question about you know, regarding scaling Kanban. So as you mentioned, you start with for example, one team, and then you realize that, okay, this team has dependency to other team, and then start another Kanban, and we put these things together. One thing that, based on my experience, senior manager and executive like to have is a standardization. So they want everyone like army, right? They follow the same workflow, they do the same thing. So it's easier for them to, when they look at, how things work, they say, okay, everyone does the same thing, all the boards are the same. That's what I want. What is your approach in this case when you want to scale Kanban on multiple teams, but the workflow is different, but management said, I want to standardize it.
Yeah, sure. Well, I try and use a little bit of logic with them in that case, because they say, oh, we want to standardize stuff. And, to an extent, they're right. You need to standardize something in a larger network. Because when you look at large scalable networks, think about the internet. It's built on protocols, highly scalable. Okay. So I think that's the key, is you need to standardize some protocols, but there are other elements that you don't need to standardize. So for example, I'd use logic to describe, well, why would the marketing team have the same workflow as the sales team, as the data team, as the software team? They're obviously different contexts. It makes absolutely no sense for them to have the same workflow. It's actually counterproductive, and you'll screw things up if you do it that way. So, and I can go into more depth about those kinds of problems with them. As if you do this, then I can guarantee that this, that, and the other will happen, and it will be bad. So instead, it might be a case of, okay, let's standardize language around, what are the points of interaction between those groups, and how do we have standards in terms of language and protocols about how the groups interact? Okay. So rather than about imposing stuff on the individual groups, we're looking at standards about how the interactions actually occur. And that's really the key about the network, because remember, the Kanban service and the service principles is that your organization is a network of interconnected services. Okay.
So can you maybe elaborate a little bit on this one?
Yeah. So what I was saying earlier is that, you're going to have different services. So let's say you're going to launch a new product or a new increment or something for an existing product. You'll have your product team coming up with what that is. Technology is inherent in a lot of products. So, you're going to need some technology elements or teams to it that come together with those particular services. You're going to want to market that product, and you're going to want to sell that product. So all of these different disciplines or services need to sort of come together in a way that's cohesive. So we don't want them to be completely fragmented, that they're not collaborating, they're not talking to each other, because otherwise our outcome is,
I see. So you recently wrote a blog about visualizing the network of services. So while we're talking about this, can you maybe refer to the article, what that article is talking about, what problem, we can solve by visualizing the network of services?
Yeah. So first of all, there's an old saying that if you can't see it, you can't manage it. And, in manufacturing, it's not such a big deal, because if you've got too many parts in the factory, you fill up the factory and you trip over them, and it's very obvious. In knowledge work, you can't see that stuff. It's contained as ones and zeros in computers, in people's heads. You can't see it. So you have to visualize that stuff. And the network of services is something that you probably need to visualize as well, so you can understand what it is and how it interacts with each other, or how the parts interact with each other within that network. And it's not always going to be the same either. So for one product or project or something along those lines, you might need certain services. For another project or product, you might need completely different services. So it's about, what are the services that you need to achieve that outcome? How does the network adapt to service that need?
Wow, that's you know what? You just defined business agility right there. How it works, how it communicates, within the system, within the organization, and how important it is when we are thinking about scaling anything, right? Like, because when we think about scaling, the basic idea is that we are making every part talk to each other, communicate in a way that makes sense. And whenever we need to pivot as a organization, we have that ability to do that because we all are in sync. And that doesn't necessarily mean that every part needs to just copy paste whatever, like it's happening in one part, the same thing needs to happen. That is not the case. And you said something really, really cool. And what Orod asked earlier, because that is a real problem people face in organization where standardization is the main goal everyone needs to achieve. But that is not the case when we are trying to scale in an organization, right? So that's a really important takeaway for people, whoever is listening to this. And also, we'll put the link of your article in the podcast and in the YouTube channel so that people can go and have a read and reach out if they have any more questions.
Yeah, I really like it when you said if you can't see, you can't manage. I think
Yeah,
that will be my takeaway so far.
that's a very cool one. And another thing I think I have learned from Dan is that once you see it, you can never unsee it.
Yes.
That's a really good one, and I always try to remember it when I go to organization for working because, and this is a very good example, right? In manufacturing, you can literally see the parts. If
Mm.
there's too many, you'll trip over it. But knowledge work is invisible. It's in there. You have to find out a way to make it visible. And so does our network. Like in organizations, when especially it's a big corporate, you have so many small networks within it. We really have to find out a way to visualize and also create those connections within so that they keep talking to each other.
Yeah. Speaking of visualization, about maybe 10 years ago, I, to be honest, didn't even know what Kanban is at that time. I was a team lead, development team lead, and I realized that I'm just too busy. Every day I was too busy, right? Maybe work easily 8, 9 hours a day, utilized, right?
Oh.
I was so busy. And then one day I was like, I'm gonna write down everything I need to do today. So I
Hmm.
just put a piece of paper. I just wrote everything that I have to do today. And I realized that there were 20, I can clearly remember. There was 20 small tasks, right? Things that I have to do. And when I look at it, I was like, oh, okay, 20, it's too much. That's why I'm too busy, right? And at that time, I had two monitors. And then I get to the point that I was like, two monitors is not enough. So I ended up with three monitors. And everything happens after I wrote it down. So, and after that, I just suggest people, when you think you're too busy, just
Hmm.
write down everything you need to do, or have one of those Kanban board behind me, those who's watching on YouTube. So just put it on the board or on a piece of paper, and that helps you to maybe manage them better and prioritize them and stuff like that.
Yep.
All
And
right.
that's actually,
So before we wrap up, we are going to have the second Kanban Australia conference then, end of October. So do you want to talk a little bit about that? What's going to happen? What people will expect to happen?
yeah, I'm very excited about this. This is the second Kanban Australia Conference. We're bringing it to Sydney this year. We were in Melbourne last year, so we want to spread the Kanban love across the country. We're going to Sydney. We want to check out the crowd up there at Sydney. So Soma, it's going to be local for you and quite a number of others. So get along. It's going to be really exciting. We've got Patrick from Okaloa and Arlette as well from Okaloa coming up. So Patrick's going to do the keynote.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all about what's, between discovery and delivery, that those little, where you actually, really get a lot of value out of your overall sort of delivery discovery Kanban system. So
Hmm.
Patrick was famous for, upstream and customer Kanban. So he's done a lot of work in this field, and I really loved their Okaloa simulations. So not only is he doing the keynote, there's also going to be a workshop with Patrick and Arlette going through some more advanced agile simulations that they've got, and they're so wonderful. You learn so much from those simulations. I know I've learned a lot from it over the years. So yeah, get along to that. And there's going to be a lot of other people from the community as well, talking about their own experiences with Kanban. There'll be case studies, how-tos and all of those sorts of things. So particularly if you're new to Kanban, this is going to be an awesome way to learn more about Kanban, meet people, talk more about it, ask questions. And we're also going to have a track that's going to be more hands-on this year as well. So if you want to get in there and actually do something and immerse yourself in Kanban, there'll be some of those activities or workshops going on during the conference as well.
Lovely. I'm going to make a game for Kanban Australia, Dan. So
looking forward to that.
yeah, me too.
One more thing though, because we are also open for submission. So everyone who is listening or watching us, please do submit talks, workshop, games. We would love to have you there. So we are going to have 3 tracks this time. So advanced, intermediate, and also beginner. So please, like whatever the level of understanding you have for Kanban, or even you are curious, please do submit, and we would love to have a chat and find out that how we can help you to refine it. So that's very important. And we are looking for all the love from everyone, because we have changed our date so that we can get more love from people in Sydney and also across Australia. So, and it's a Halloween date, isn't it, Dan? That's
Yeah, that's what our American friends remind us of.
Yes.
Do we need to have a custom?
Well, you are welcome to. You're welcome to. If you want to wear a Halloween costume to the Kanban Australia, we would love to, like get a photo of that and put you on our website.
With this frame, I can be the Harry Potter. Speaking of Patrick, a couple of years ago, then we met and we went to Kanban, India, and we met Patrick.
Right.
One thing that I remember after one of the conversation I had with Patrick, he said constructive constraint. So it's a big topic. People, please go and Google and read a little bit about it. But that was something, I learn and stick, he's a very nice person, knowledgeable, experience. So I look forward to meet him again. All right. So I normally ask one question from all our guests. What does Kanban mean to you, Dan?
Oh, wow. That's deep this early in the morning. Okay. What does it mean to me? It's really the core of the way I work. It's so ingrained in what I do that it's a part of me, I guess. It has become, over the last decade or a little bit more, I've been using it more and more and more. And I can't separate me from Kanban. It's there. It's
part of your identity now.
Yeah, exactly. So you're right. It's part of my identity now.
Good. All right. Thanks, Dan. Soma, is there anything else you wanna talk about or ask Dan?
We should ask Dan. Dan, is there anything else that you would like to add to our episode today? Like any key takeaways that you want our audience to pay attention to?
Yeah, so I guess if you're scaling, again, focus on problem, focus on the humans. It's, they're not machines in a factory, they're humans. It's going to be a complex environment, and you'll need to adapt what you're doing to suit the environment and the context. So be sensitive to context and the humans while you apply your Kanban to the problems.
That's so cool, and a very good summarization of what we just spoke. So thank you, Dan. Thank you, Orod, and thanks everyone for listening to us. Please don't forget to subscribe to our channel. I think I'm becoming that influencer now who is asking for subscription, and also comment. Please comment on our episode as well. And
our YouTube channel is slowly but growing.
Yes.
All right, lovely to meet you, Dan. Thanks for your time and thanks for sharing your experience regarding scaling Kanban. And I'll look forward to meet you both in Kanban Australia in October. Thanks, everyone.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.